I'm sorry about the sound. I mean, I started to get used to it after a while, but it only sounds much better than that. It's very muddy and low. We were trying to fix it, but I think it worked. So now that we've seen it, I can obviously talk much more about it, but one of the main reasons why we didn't want to tell anybody what we were doing was, a lot of it was because we wanted to be able to make things up as we went. And there's another sort of aspect with making horror films where from the moment you announce something, the genre press, rightfully so, wants information, casting information, they want set visits, stills. And so what we did is we said that we were making an art documentary, and then nobody cared. So that worked. And then obviously after tonight, now people will start hearing like what it actually is. So obviously I can't control what anyone's gonna say, but if you could not spoil it, I would really appreciate it. And you say whatever you like, if you hated it, if you loved it, whatever, but just if you could not spoil exactly what it is, because that is part of the fun of it, is not knowing. Ray Wise contacted me randomly in 2010. He just called my cell phone, which was odd, because I thought it was a prank call. Because he's like, Ray Wise. I was like, get the fuck out. But he had just seen Spiral, and he's like, just going on about the movie, and he wanted to work with me, and you know, he always plays the lawyer, the president. He's like, I just want to play a character, and I'm like, well, I might have something that's up your alley. And we met and we spoke about it. Now there was a script for the whole thing, but what we did was, like, for instance, Kane Hodgson, he's still, like, he has no idea what the movie actually is. He just knew what that one bit was. And he's looking at the monster on the street, like, he really didn't know. And he said what I told him to say, but that was really it. But in my first meeting with Ray, I said, as far as Decker's backstory goes, I don't want you to tell me, because we're both going to stay in character through the whole filming of this thing, which was what probably made this one of the most fun experiences of my life. Like, we really went monster hunting every night. And he was totally in character, and like, I'm sure there's at least some of you that are like me that just have always wished something like this would happen. So it was the ultimate sort of make-believe type thing where I got to pretend that all this was real. But when I asked Ray about his backstory, I said, but don't tell me what it is, because I don't want to know. He said, well, there's just one part I need to ask. He's like, because the clues are there. But he said, I feel like my wife and I had a deformed child who at a certain age disappeared, and that's what ended our marriage. Nobody knows where he went, and because of that experience I had as a child, seeing something out by that woodpile, I was convinced that that's where my son went, and that's why I've been following him. So there's, you know, we've only really shown this to mainly other horror directors and stuff when I was getting notes, because we had so much footage and whittling it down. And most of the stuff that we cut out, in fact, all the stuff we cut out were comedic beats. Originally, I had played it to be so skeptical of Decker that I was just coming off like an even bigger asshole than I do come on at the beginning. But if I had just instantly believed it, that would have been even more ridiculous. So everyone has their own theory for what was in his storage closet. And one of my favorite things was Alan Jones, after he watched I think it was the final actually, or actually not the final because I kind of flew here with that. But he said, he's like, oh, and it was so obvious what was in the basement. First of all, it wasn't a fucking basement. So you're wrong there. But he was way off with what he thought. But you know, much like if you've seen Spiral, like Joel David Moore, who co-directed that with me, we don't ever really answer because it's more fun to hear what other people think. And you know, this storyline, and this is really all based on an art exhibit, which is what's the weirdest thing about it. And that's why we had to do it the way we did it. You can't pitch this to a studio or a mainstream financier and just show them artwork and say this is the story, because they just don't really think like that. But hearing people's theories about the Marrow and Decker and what he's lying about and what he's not lying about, but he was a very, very sympathetic, and I started to forget that he was Ray Wise because he's just such an incredible actor, but I felt so badly for him at times, which also made this a very unique experience, because I'm out there thinking he's crazy. I'm starting to think I see monsters. And if you do a repeat viewing, you might see some things that you didn't see the first time, because we really did layer it with stuff. I'm glad that everybody saw, or at least it seemed like everybody saw the one on the monitor, which is my favorite. That one's called Tombstone. And the poor girl had to sit there in that cemetery for like forever before we would give her the cue to get up and walk away, and she can't see. If you look up online, digging up the Marrow, you'll see some of Alex's artwork, and you can see what that one looks like in close-up. In fact, the next variant poster is Tombstone. But aside from that one, and Blossom, which is the one that was on the hood of the car, that was actually Josh Ethier, the editor. The rest of them were all animatronic or puppets. The most difficult one being the very first one, when we turn on the camera light. There were 6 people to operate that, which seems weird, but the head was like that big, and so there was one person kind of holding it up, there was one person operating the eyes, there was one that was doing the jaw, there was spit that comes out at the camera, and then there was actually the same Caitlin who was the Tombstone. Her hands were painted and she was underneath it to bring the hands up, all for not even a second shot. The monsters, Alex Pardee drew them, and then a guy named Greg Aronowitz was the one who sculpted them, and Greg is like Spielberg's guy. He's worked on every Spielberg movie since Jurassic Park. If you look him up on IMDb, you'll be like shocked at his credits, but he's just an amazing sculptor. And then from there, it went to Robert Pendergraft and Aunt Dolly's Garage, who did all the Hatchet movies. And they're the ones who actually operated, and every night was an argument with him about, like, can't we just spray blood on something? I'm like, no, nobody's getting killed. We'll just spray blood anyway. But it's a PG movie. When you think about it, I think race is asshole once, but other than that, there's no swearing, there's no violence, so that's something new. So there's another screen that's going to start soon. So, also, if you're going to the Duke Mitchell party, I'm going to be screening something that I guess I can probably spoil it and say what it is, but Ariscope has done a short film for Halloween every year for the past. This is our 16th year doing it, so we just finished it, and it's not going to come out till October, but I'm going to show it at that tonight, and it stars Shawn Ashmore from Frozen and X-Men and the following, and it's pretty cool. Also, I have the posters down here, so because we're going to have to clear the theater, I'm going to step outside with those and hand them off as you guys walk out. But okay, any questions? Yes?
I was speaking to you the other day about Collison. How do you think after we've lost one of the community's, I don't know, most unique and amazing people, do you think that that's going to change the style of how you direct in the future?
How I direct Collison?
Yeah, or in general as a person, do you think that it's going to affect what you make after?
So the question is, losing Dave, Rocky, how that's going to affect things. Well, I learned a lot from him and just from Guar as a 25-year-long fan in terms of knowing that it's okay to make the things that you want to make and not worry about what anybody thinks or what Hollywood thinks. And this is a direct result of my fan base, though, because I've been so fortunate that, when I made Hatchet, that was a movie that was just sort of my answer to what was happening at the times. If you remember, in the mid-2000s, everything was a remake, or it was torture porn, or it was PG-13 horror, but there was no more slasher movies or villains or practical effects with gore. So I didn't know that there were that many other horror fans that thought like I did who would appreciate it. And I made Spiral at the same time, which is nothing like Hatchet. But because of that, and because of the fans supporting that, I've been able to keep kind of flip-flopping and doing whatever I feel like doing, which so few filmmakers have that opportunity. So I never take that for granted. And if I tried to make a movie like this first, we never would have been able to get the money for it. I don't even know if it would have found an audience. Dave was a huge component when I explained it to him, because what we were honestly worried about was using ourselves as subject matter. Is that going to look like it's just self-promotion? Is that going to be weird? But he was like, that's what makes this special. Nobody else could make this because nobody else are you guys. And if we had made up a fake filmmaker who's a cult filmmaker and fake movie titles and all that, it just wouldn't have been the same thing. So that was sort of, that encouragement sort of kept me going and doing it. And it's, of course, weird that the one soundbite we used, which was shot, you know, at Comic-Con probably a year or 2 years ago now, that he says, I've been a monster, I always will be a monster, and after I'm dead, I'll be a dead monster. His memorial was last weekend in Virginia, and we did this like Viking send-off that was amazing, where the Odorous costume was in a boat, and an archer shot like a flaming arrow into it, and there were bagpipes, and they were expecting a few hundred fans to come to this thing, and 4,000 fans showed up, and it was absolutely beautiful. Jello Biafra from Dead Kennedy spoke, and Randy Blythe from Lamb of God, and then myself. If you look it up online, you can see the speeches and stuff, but it was incredible that many people respected him the way they did, and it is a severe loss. As far as Collison goes, you know, I'm the sole writer, but Joe Lynch is the executive producer with me, and we kind of bounce ideas off each other, and we know how we're going to address it. And the good thing about Collison is that we can be serious on such a ridiculous show. We did this Christmas special that got very emotional, and the network hated it, and when they aired it, they cut out all the emotional stuff. But then when it hit on demand, with the rest of it in it, the horror fans spoke more loudly than everybody. And I think that's one of the problems with Suits in general, is they don't understand that we're real people. And that if anybody understands what it's like to feel fucking awful and rejected and not get the girl or the guy or the job or whatever, it's us. And I think that's why we're a community, and that's why we're so nice to each other, because that's who we are. So how we address Dave's departure will be heartfelt and serious, and then from that point on, the closet door will just stay shut. A lot of people have been saying, "Oh, get Ballsack from Guar, get another guy." Like you can't do that. Yes.
Hi. I moved here about a year ago, and I teach film theory and film history, and I taught 2 classes, one on documentary and one on science fiction and horror. One thing I found teaching those classes was that there was so much of a crossover between the two. And I was wondering, I mean, even like with horror, you have the found footage and the documentary stuff, but even with documentary, you have like Act of Killing, which is one of the most horrific films I've seen, or Werner Herzog, who talks about ecstatic truth, and that you can only get to truth through imagination and fabrication and stylization. And I was wondering, from your perspective as a filmmaker, as a horror filmmaker, do you see any division between what you do with genre and documentary, or do you think those divisions are collapsing now?
So the question, just to make sure I get this right, was as a filmmaker, do I see a crossover between documentary and fiction?
Yeah, or genre and horror.
Genre and horror, yeah. I mean, that's sort of what this was an exercise in, because we took this fantastical idea of monsters living below us and stuff, but then plugged it into a very real situation, which was why we made the choice to play ourselves and show our real company and stuff. Just for the record, too, that's not my real house. That was the one thing. I know better now. I've always been so open with people, but there's been a couple stalker situations, so I knew better than to show my own front door. But yeah, I think the two do merge really well together. I think that's what horror is, the scariest when you can relate to it and when it's real. You know, even simple stuff like being alone in the house and there's somebody outside or whatever, we've all felt that. I think that's why paranormal movies work so well, because everybody's had some sort of experience where they heard a bump or something they can't explain. So when you take real people who react in a very real way, which is why everyone does react the way they do in this, I feel like it's very honest, the way that we treat Decker, the whole thing. I mean, obviously, for me, I really would in real life want to believe this, and if like that actually happened to me, I would have done all those same things. It's sad that I got him captured in the end, and I would apologize profusely if I could. But yeah, I think when horror plays on your real emotions, and you know what's weird about this though is it's about real fantasy, if that makes any sense. But most of us got into this stuff because we love monsters, and wouldn't it be awesome if it was real? And I hope, whether you like love this, whether you didn't, but at some point in the next few days, I hope you think about the theory behind this, because you know you see pictures and photographs all the time of people that are so unfortunately born, you know, horribly disfigured, but you don't see them. Where do they go? Like, they're not walking around, they're not like, so what if they did find their own place to be happy and have their own lives and live them out? And like the next time You see, like, you know, like Alex was saying in the beginning, very beginning documentary part, when he sees a chair, just because he can't see behind it, he thinks there's something there. So wherever you can't see, just imagine what is actually there. Just walking through Leicester Square, you know, those sewers. Like, what if? Like, what's down there? Because then your mind just starts going and going and going. And this is really just a small taste of a much, much bigger world. But there was no way to tackle that in a documentary style. But, you know, it's so hard to try to do something as an original format. And like to us, like this isn't found footage at all. Like obviously there's scenes that have to play out because if we were shooting a documentary, that's all the footage we would have. But it's all edited and put together, there's music. But we never used music during the scare moments, the jump scares. And I was really happy to see how effectively that worked. Like the one with the boot and then Decker's just standing there. You're so tempted as a director to put a boom there or something, but you guys proved that it's really that. So that was really, really fun to watch. And there's also that, you know, argument about comedy in horror because it's very hard to do well. But I mean, this movie inherently is very funny because that would be the reaction to this guy. So, and Ray Wise is so great, and I wish he would get more roles like this and not always have to be the straight guy who gives exposition. You know, I mean, he's such a character, and this was also his first nude scene. Dude, he's done 94 movies. And I got him naked, ladies. Yes?
How much input did you have into the design of the monsters, or was that totally the artist?
How much input did I have in the design of the monsters? You know, a lot, but a lot of these were the monsters that I originally saw, but what we had to do is make them a little bit more practical because I don't like CGI, and so we wanted to do things that we could pull off on set. So they were very expensive to make, even though they're only on screen for a few seconds, and if you could see them up close, they're so intricate. I mean, Chicken, the little one that runs by, is my favorite. He even has an asshole. Like, when they were showing me that, I mean, it was so real looking. And we did use a little bit of visual effects to enhance things. Like he's on a track that was being pulled, so we removed the track. Blossom, 2 of his arms were CG. That one was really crazy because Josh they were all spring loaded, and he was holding them under the bag, and then when he lets go, they whip up. And when you think about it, springs have a tendency to do this, and so we couldn't have that. So these springs were so tight, and I mean, Josh is a big guy, but he's under there for a long time just going, and then when it finally lets go, and it's like, bam, and everyone just kept saying to him, like, concentrate, because if it hits you in the face, you're gonna die. And he's like, oh, I'm okay, I'm bald. I don't know why that matters. And I was like, it's okay, guys, he's bald. Yes?
With the idea that monsters could be hiding anywhere, did you ever freak yourself out on set?
Yeah, I was freaked out through the whole thing. And when I would go home, I was freaked out. And it's this weird, especially when you're playing yourself. I spoke about this a little bit last year at the Collison screening, where in the show, because it's based on my life, I'm playing myself at a different time in my life. And so it's one thing to write it and rehearse it, but then when you're in it as an actor and you have to feel that way again, it sucks. And so for this, you know, you do take it home with you, and I still, like, I look in the trees, I look at everything I hear. But at the same time, as I'm freaked out, I'm walking towards it because I want to see it so bad. Like, I'm definitely the first one to go in any horror movie because, you know, everybody goes, what was that sound? I'm the guy who says, let's check it out. I want to see it so bad. And obviously, I know a lot of people listen to the podcast that Joe and I do the movie Crib, so by now you probably heard, but, you know, Bradley and I got divorced earlier this year, which the worst thing I've ever gone through, ever. 10 years together, and, you know, I won't bore you with that story, but watching this, it really is like a time capsule, and it's just weird. And Dave, her, it's really weird. But now I can sort of look at it even more like fiction in a weird way. But yeah, crazy, really, really weird. Someone saved me a question. Yes.
I have a question. Did you ever find the secret entrance in the IHOP, or did you at least look for it?
Did we ever find the entrance in the IHOP? No, we did not. But I hear that there's something weird behind the Denny's. And I look forward to checking that out. I think we have time for one more. someone stand up in the back now? Okay, right here.
Oh, you had Ray Wise, you had Robert England, you had Kane Hodder, you had Benny Todd. I was just wondering, on a list, like, who's on your hit list next? Like, who's the dream after all those guys? Like, is there anyone left?
Oh man, I don't know. I've been so lucky that I've gotten to work with all of those guys, and that they come to me. You know, it's I think they appreciate that they get to do roles that aren't just being the typical scary thing that they do. Like, you know, Kane's gotten to do comedy, dance. Like Tony Todd. I mean, if you've seen Tony Todd's episode of Collison, I mean, it's hilarious. But I think I wish more directors would give those guys the opportunities that they deserve, but they get, you know. It's a dream case scenario to be Robert Englund and be cast as Freddy Krueger and be iconic for the rest of your life. But it also is tough because you're Freddy Krueger, no matter what you do. People are like, oh, it's Freddy. If you've seen a lot of his other stuff, some of the more obscure stuff, I mean, he's a phenomenal actor who can do so many other things. So I've enjoyed being able to give those guys opportunities to be funny. Or even like Tom Holland, who used to be an actor way back in the day. Nobody knows that. They know him as the director of Child's Play and Fright Night, but he was an actor. And I was able to convince him in Hatchet 2 to act again, which was really fun. But as far as next, oh man, I don't know how to answer that. I'm too afraid that whatever name I say, the person's gonna die because of the year I've had. So I just should shut the fuck up. We do have to clear the theater for the next screening. I'm gonna run out first so I can have everybody a poster. Thank you guys so much for coming.